Okay. All right. Are we together now?
Yes, Papa. Go
Okay,
ahead.
sir. Okay. Greetings again to everybody, and thank you very much for this opportunity to share on this particular topic. I start first by sharing my own understanding of Ubuntu. The chairperson has defined Ubuntu, and I want to bring in an understanding that I have of Ubuntu that I will base my presentation on, which is not exclusive of what the chairperson has shared. And for me, Ubuntu is an identity. It's an identity that a human identity, not just an African identity, because it is universal. Ubuntu is universal principle, has universal principles. So even though we have a name for it, Ubuntu, in English it is civility, it is humaneness. So it is only that it is us who practiced it a lot and who believed in sharing. But that is where I'll be coming from. And Ubuntu, for me, helps us to be able to achieve our own individual and collective life purposes. And so what we will be looking at today is to see how Ubuntu becomes that life purpose, how Ubuntu becomes that human identity, and how I propose we derailed, not lost, we derailed from the Ubuntu path, and how we may recover the path and the trajectory. So one of the main things that I'm going to be doing here is also clarify something that I am aware that a number of people believe that something that's complex is difficult, when in essence, complexity or a complex thing means something that has got many elements, interconnected elements. And it may be that people think it is difficult because it's got many interconnected elements. But the whole purpose of sharing anything, the whole purpose of the education that the chairperson talked about is to simplify things. Communication is meaningful only when it sends the message accurately across to the receiver of the communication. So what we are going to be doing here is, I feel that I will have achieved my goal in tonight's presentation if by the end of it I will have raised your awareness of what Ubuntu implies, how it affects our own life purpose, and how it got lost and how we may recover. But I also hope that I will be able to motivate us that indeed, as Africans, as people who have suffered long-term repression, we need to recover from that repression, the effects and the legacy of that repression, as King Koko said. So at very best, that is what I intend to achieve. Yes, I'll be sharing a lot of content here and principles, but I'm sure we are aware that we are not going to be sitting an exam at the end of this presentation. So I will share with the chairperson a few days from now, because I decided not to finish the paper, the text paper, so that I may include insights that will arise out of this presentation. But the presentation itself is going to be very pictorial. And as I said, something complex is something that has got many elements that are interconnected. I'm going to be talking about the elements of Ubuntu, the elements of our own central human response mechanism, how we respond to our life challenges, interact with those life challenges, and interact with the environment, including interacting with other humans. So, and which, of course, King Koko, as you said, there's something problematic about the Eurocentric and coloniality education, because the purpose was for it to subdue us, and therefore it has got limitations. And we will be looking also at the emerging idea of transpersonal mental health, because colonization, slavery, and all forms of repression and abuse impact on its subjects psychologically. It lowers the capacity of our thinking. And so even though we do achieve a number of things, it is possible that we can achieve much more than we've been currently achieving. We've also been talking about African unity. That unity can only come out as a result of practiced Ubuntu. And so it is the unity of Africa and the unity of humanity that we will be seeking, but it is also performance, because slavery, colonialism, apartheid, and any form of abuse also impacts adversely on people's performances. So even though we may already be achieving great things, it is possible and indeed very true that we are still limiting ourselves because of the legacies of this long-term repression. And so we can relive, free our minds, free our brains, detox our brains. As the chairperson said, he talked about the turning of hides, the cleaning of rinsing, hand rinsing of aprons or clothes, and that process, we'll be talking about it and likening it to some scientific processes that some experts have come up with that help to detox our brains and our minds of the effects of long-term repression. We'll go, because this is going to be very involved, we'll go for maybe half of the slides, and then we'll take a short break from the presentation and have a short discussion, clarifications and questions where they are needed, and then into the next half to complete the presentation. But first, because what we are talking about is learning and education, let us first look at how education approaches evolved. Human beings started by focusing on knowledge, which is called the instruction paradigm, and then which is basically principles. And as Hinkoko talked about the principles of Ubuntu, like we are only human because of others, talking about relationships, talking about collaboration. Those principles on their own cannot make Ubuntu. It is their practice that actually results in Ubuntu. And so education itself has evolved from that first stage of knowledge, of sharing content, cognitive knowledge, to this next stage of looking at the process of learning, the learning paradigm. How do people learn best? The environment, the conditions of learning, and also methods of teaching and learning, methods of communicating. And these are processes that are technical, that the coloniality education or the Eurocentric education has been focusing on. But recently, education has evolved to now include the knower, the actual person who is expected to receive the knowledge and to transform, to help them to transform this knowledge, to help them to transform their way of thinking and their behavior. And as a result of that, we will be looking very deeply into the mechanism that helps us to to respond to our life challenges. But even though education has evolved to this stage, the conventional interventions are still limited. We will see how limited they are, and we will go beyond that. They are limited to the point that even though human beings are social creatures, because that is the only way we can survive in this environment where there are animals and carnivores, man-eating animals, we need to work together. And deep inside us, this is a picture of two human beings, this transparent wire-like bodies here facing away from each other is adults. Inside them, we can see that there are toddlers in there, babies in there, who are striving to embrace each other, which is what maybe in the religious field, maybe Christianity, people talk about being born again. Being born again is not what usually happens in churches. It is actually getting the inner person, the inner you, to come out and embrace each other human beings. But now a new challenge has come up. Technology has helped us to develop artificial intelligence. But now artificial intelligence seems to be taking over. And if we are not careful, it will make us obsolete. People have developed robots, and we are told that Elon Musk has got a robot girlfriend who he intends to escape with to Mars and go and live there. But because these robots do not eat, and because we keep improving them, they will not need the food that we need. They will live from energy from the sun and from the stars, and we will become very obsolete. And if we are not careful, we are endangering ourselves. Actually, one of the challenges that Sweden has met is that students, they try to get students to learn online, and students were learning reading from online. And what they discovered is that reading online of soft copies actually lowers down the intelligence. It affects the brain adversely. And so they have stopped that. They are looking at how best they can be able to deal with that. And that even though we too are trailing behind, are trying to find out ways of e-education and e-learning, we need to be very careful about that. Okay? Let's have a look at what the creator or creation does that long-term repression and the coloniality education has hidden from us. In our ordinary lives, we will see events. Maybe this is a stimulus, something that we have to respond to. And this is our thought. These are the processes that happen inside our brains and minds. Processes that happen inside our brains and minds until we get to the output that we are able to observe. Science has been able to measure and detect some of this, but not everything, as we are going to see. Now, these are the things that we see. We know we can be talking about what were you thinking about? What was he thinking about? What was happening in the brain? And yet, something is hidden below this quantum mechanical body. I liken it. It is the subconscious mind and the non-conscious mind that deals with most of these things outside of our awareness. And I liken this to what we were shown in, or what we are told in the Bible for those who are Christians, but it is there even in other religions. That of cherubims that were put on the eastern gate after the human being went astray. What makes this possible, this hiding of the processes that take place in our brains, are things that happen in even from our early lives. Imprints block our brains. Imprints are traumatic experiences that babies may experience that threaten them, cause them to be very fearful. And if they happen very early, maybe even earlier than 3 years in their lives, they may not even remember those incidences. And those incidences keep piling up until people develop what then we may end up calling personality, not understanding why a person is behaving the way they are. But there are also self-fulfilling prophecies where people have been told you are weak, you are stupid, and they end up believing that. And such things block us from the Ubuntu, because what the slave masters and the colonial masters have been drilling into us is that we are inferior. And many people have been believing that. And they believe that fear is fear that people have had. We are going to show how fear affects our brains and how it affects our responses to life. And as I said, I liken it to this idea of cherubims that are put there with swords that flow in all directions, so that man cannot go back to consciousness, so that man cannot go back to the Garden of Eden. But this was valid. This was valid only when men still believed in a flat earth, because in a flat earth, if you were locked out of the Garden of Eden from the eastern gate, walking eastwards, you then get to the end and you'd fall off the earth. But now that we know that the earth is spherical, when you continue to walk to the east, you end up appearing at the Garden of Eden, at the Garden of Consciousness, on the western gate. And the western gate is not guarded against you. And this is what many people still believe, that it is difficult or maybe impossible to get back to godly consciousness. But that is possible because we've been created in the image of the Creator and the likeness of the Creator. The same thing happened, again, I liken it, for those of us who are Christians, to what happened at the grave of Jesus Christ. That they blocked the grave with a big stone and put a guard outside and hope that he would not leave. But he escaped, and the women found that in the morning, they found that after 3 days, he had arisen. In other words, Ubuntu, even though the colonizer may lock it up in a grave and believe that we will never come out, we can come out once we open up our spiritual capacities, our spiritual consciousness. So what happens inside the subconscious mind and the unconscious mind? Processes that are of high intelligence, the infinite intelligence, timeless intelligence. The stimulus is tied to our beliefs and our attitudes, how we think, and it is tied to the outcomes. So this is positive, the white is positive thinking and love thinking that is of people who self-love themselves. The outcomes are assured to be positive and constructive. But with fear, the processes are also tied to the outcomes. You get negative outcomes. And these are hidden from many people. They are only given to people who, maybe a few selected people who will go and study things like quantum mechanics or quantum physics. But even there, I studied quantum physics myself, but even there, you are not taught that these are actually instructions of creation. These are laws of creation. You are given, when you ask somebody to please stand up or come here, you are giving them a quantum instruction that they respond to. And those instructions, when we have understood and clarified how the brain and the mind works and how it can be blocked and unlocked, then it will become clear that, after all, these subjects are not all that difficult. But that is that the processes inside there obey operations and instructions that are below the surface, so that the observable then becomes something that is manifest. And that is something I want to explain a little bit, that it shouldn't matter that it is a big equation or something, but all that it says is that energy, this E, is what produces matter. So when the Big Bang or God created the universe, he used the energy, and using that energy in this manner where of multiplying the mass with the velocity or speed of light, then gives us the universe. In other words, the universe is derived out of the energy of the creator, or out of the energy of that Big Bang, as other people believe in Big Bang. But that would be the negative one. We can transform that simply by recovering Ubuntu, and we can have positive outcomes coming out of positive energy. And that is precisely what we are going to be looking at, how to do that in simple terms. One of the things that I should mention is that even though we are looking at these things that may look so complex, the processes that we are going to be talking about are processes that even people who have not gone to school understand, and they are able to transform them, because these processes can be presented in any language. What I'm presenting here, even though it is written here in English, can be written in any language, and because it is in pictures, it can be explained in using any language. The only requirement is that maybe when you have a group of people that you are working with, at least a third of them must be able to read and write, so that they can help to read the instructions, the simple instructions that help to transform the mind and to heal the brain. I'm likening this again to what somebody else calls an eggshell. This eggshell is what colonialism and slavery enclosed that in. So, like chicklets, what we need to do to rebirth ourselves, we need to break the egg from the inside, not from the outside. We cannot be helped. Somebody cannot come from the outside to come and save us, to come and free us from the effects of colonization. All that the chicken does is to provide a good environment, a warm environment, and the chicklets have to hatch from inside. This is a process or a principle that is called occupational intelligence. In other words, it is competence together with the inner drive to complete a given task to an agreed standard, not just the competence. What our human resource training and what our technical training does is to give us just the competencies, and does not care about whether we shall be able to complete those to agreed standards. So we have to, cracking ourselves into consciousness is breaking our own ego shells, our own eggshells. In life, where we start is when we've smelled this coffee, because the English say that we must wake up and smell the coffee. We need to smell the coffee so that we can heal. In every task that a human being does, we start like little babies who are non-functional, and they are not even aware that they are functional, at a level that the founder of this occupational intelligence calls level 0. And at the level 0, the person is oblivious. A newly born baby is oblivious to everything. They have to be taught even how to suckle. They have to be given the breast. With time, in any task, a person begins to realize that they are not competent in that thing. In other words, they are incompetent about something, but they don't even know that they do not know. But when that happens is that people have unrealistic expectations about things. When we do not know about what we are going to be talking about, which is beyond the Eurocentric coloniality education, then we may feel that we can be able to do things. And even when they do not succeed, then we have to find something to blame. At a higher level, when we continue to learn about the new task, then we become aware that, oh, actually, we do not know about this thing. And what happens to most of us? Some people may become victims and have developed victim mentality. And they become timid and have defeatism mentality. Or some may decide to be aggressive and violent and defensive, that no, we can do this thing. It doesn't need anybody to go to school or to learn that thing. With time and learning, people become consciously competent. They know that they know something. It's like riding a bicycle. When you ride a bicycle, you begin from zero. Then at some point, you are still learning. You are looking at your feet as you cycle. You are looking at your feet. If you are driving a car, you are looking at the pedals to see which pedal to step on. And colonization and slavery wants to leave us at that. It wants to leave us to where we are dependent, where to do everything we need to be asking. But then it suppresses us with fear, gives us stress, and so that we remain at the bottom of the rung. And then it gets covered up. We talked about cover-up mechanisms, so that we believe that this is the only level we can rise to. And what has been found out is that there are ways that do that. Some people are taught things like mathematics, things like the science that we talked about. People are just taught to memorize things. And even when they become teachers, they just get students to memorize. They are not able to help them to be able to understand, so that they can apply these things even for positive outcomes. Coloniality causes a lot of things. It causes lack of self-awareness, anosognosia, lack of self-awareness or inaccurate self-awareness, where people just think in the same way and resist new information and resist to change. So even for many of us, and I come from there myself, because sometimes we think that we know something so much, we've gone to school, we resist new information. And that is what happened to me at some point, some 1997, before somebody insisted that they were going to help me to go and learn something new. And after that, I've never turned back. But that is what happens. But there's also a problem that comes with lack of knowledge, where even it's called the smell-based syndrome, where even though you are expected to be helping people, it is you who is actually bringing problems to them. You will read about the smell-based syndrome. I will not go into the detail. You'll find it where doctors would be expected to help expectant mothers to deliver healthy babies, and the mothers would die together with their babies. And the doctors did not know. That was before people knew anything about germs. Until they knew about germs, then they washed their hands, because previously they used to go to mortuaries, deal with corpses, then directly go and into the maternity wards and bring in the germs from the mortuaries. And they resisted when they were first told, you need to wash your hands, because doctors felt that they were gentlemen, they were clean. And everything that is new, people tend to resist. And so we need to overcome this challenge. COVID brought the same problem. There is what the North American Indians call wetiko, mind virus and mind blindness. Excessive fear causes blindness of the mind. We don't see things properly. And also our colonial education has fragmented disciplines. So when people begin to specialize, they specialize in one little thing and become experts in it. And yet solutions of life are not only found within one discipline, but are interdisciplinary, which is what we are going to be looking at and learning. So above that level is a level where people become consciously competent, but this time now they don't need to be supported. That is when they break through from this gap here. At a higher level, then they become competitively competent, but they still are somehow subjected to some effects of coloniality education. And at a higher level, which is a level that we want to move into, the level that Ubuntu is found in, is where people are unconsciously competent. In other words, where you become one with your task, with your competence, with your skills. So what you are doing, like when people ride bicycles, sometimes they don't hold the horns. Sometimes they just stand on it, and we've seen people performing miracles with a lot of gadgets. That is the level that we need to all be moving to, and that is the level of Ubuntu. We have a program that helps us to move into that. It's called the Holistic Integrated Experiential Learning Approach. In other words, what we learn best and what we learn more is what we experience, rather than what is science believes in of empirical evidence. Scientists and Eurocentric education believes in that empirical evidence. They say that what is experienced is not scientific, and it is only because science is still lagging behind. But the processes then help us, give us a quantum leap to the higher levels, so that we can become more competent. And that is the level at which a lot of miracles begin to happen, where people begin to complete feats that we are not so used to. And it is a new growth mindset, a new mindset and outlook to life. And how do you get that? You wake up again, but it is done gradually. Everybody is comfortable with what they are doing. And as I said, we are creatures of comfort. We get used to doing things, and we don't want to change from that. But for people to be able to change, into this Ubuntu from the coloniality legacy, we have to be patient and help them, just like in the athletics competitions of high jump. Even though people will jump 2 or more meters, they start at a very low level, even at that competition. You start increasing the challenges just a little bit until they become out of their comfort zone, a little bit slowly, until they can feel that, oh, I'm able to do this. And when they feel that they are able to do this, then the inner drive develops. When the inner drive develops, then they begin to respond in ways that are responsible. They start pushing themselves, and then they get satisfied. They get satisfying results. And you keep repeating, you keep raising the bar of the high jump. The same thing happens when we want to relearn Ubuntu. And how does that happen? Now we get closer to the central human response mechanism. How our perceptions control our genes, how they control and rewrite our behaviors. This is the human brain. The human brain is divided into subconscious mind and the conscious mind. The subconscious mind controls 95% of everything that we think and everything that we do. It is like an iceberg. This is the subconscious mind, the conscious mind rather, that is on the surface. What we see, what we talked about in the earlier slide. What we see in the conscious mind is only about 5%. Our logical thinking, our will, short-term memory, critical thinking, and decisions. But below that is the subconscious mind, which houses our human central our central human response mechanism. Below that is the unconscious mind that controls the 95%, where there are beliefs, values, long-term memory, instincts, and intuitions, and even those fears that we talk about, and habits and imagination, which control all the systems. And this is what we want to have access to, which the coloniality education does not allow us to do. And we have to break into that. Next is our belief system. We develop beliefs because we have been trying things, trying to respond to our life challenges, and some things work. When they work, we repeat them. Then we begin to start teaching them to our new members, to our younger ones. And we develop values. Values, a lot of times people talk about values, even in organizations. People talk about values, but they are just listed there and they are not of any use in culture. Values are like railroads. They should guard us from falling over out of the road. They should help us. There should be signs that tell us that these values, if you go beyond this, is danger. Our values should also help us to tell us how the terrain is ahead. They should help us to move towards our vision. That is how values should be. And so how do we use this to respond to our life challenges, to respond to our highly uncertain, volatile, and complex universe? The challenge, we receive the challenge with our brain, and because of our beliefs, we develop perceptions. These perceptions, we use how we think about something. We use them to respond. What do they do, these perceptions? These perceptions open our DNAs, and they write new stories, new instructions on our genes. And how do that happen? It is like our fruit trees. Our fruit trees, when it is spring, they bear flowers. And for the flowers to bear fruit, they need to attract bees. But for them to attract bees, they need to have nectaries right at the bottom there. They are priorities for the nectaries which will help them to cross-pollinate. When the bees come in, they brush their bodies against male pollen, and they transport the male pollen to the female ovules, and that is cross-pollination. And so then we get flowers. And only then are we able to govern and to control our thoughts and behavior. That is how the perceptions control our thoughts and our behavior and our responses. So once that has happened, when we have given people things to look forward to, when you are addressing their priorities, not your own priorities, how will this Ubuntu help people to improve their lives and their life conditions? That is what we should bear in mind. It shouldn't just be that I am personally convinced that we need Ubuntu. It should also be tied down to the priorities of the people that you want to change. But coloniality gives us some benefits. So people are used to these benefits and they fear the unknown. They don't know what Ubuntu will bring. They just hear it from our words. But when that has been done, when we have rewritten our genes, we are able to get the outcomes that we want, but they should be tied to those priorities of individuals. And what we get is the Ubuntu, the unity that we are talking about, and the freedom that we're looking about. Otherwise, if in excessive fear, in coloniality, with the education that we use, it does not regard all of those things that I've just talked about. All it does is it develops technical theories, it develops laws and things, and hopes that they will change. When people do reforms All they do is they look at laws and they hope that things will change, and they will not change. And when they don't change, people then are surprised. They want to find something to blame. Then we get unexpected consequences. We go into murky swamps that are full of serpents, and we'll talk about serpents. Those of us who are Christians know about the story of the serpent right at the beginning of creation. Maybe we should take questions here, King Koko, if that is okay, so that we are not talking forever here. People may want some clarifications before we now get right inside the brain to see how this Ubuntu affects real life.
Thank you. Thank you, King. Any questions, comrades?
Could you also kindly raise your voice a little bit?
Do you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right.
Can we request our colleagues to raise their voices, because I'm not hearing well here?
All right. Are there any questions, comrades? Ntate Mafole.
Yeah,
Go ahead, sir.
I really am one of the people who have gone into what Ntate Mafole is talking about. And I really find his talk, I really find it fascinating. At the beginning, he spoke, if I can go to my question, he spoke at the way he introduced the thing, was speaking about education and kind of spoke about it. Let me start, I think it's from what you said in the first place. The value of language and where language can be a problem. And right now we are conversing English, which is our colonial language that we use. Now, I come from a school that says, even though the language was meant to suppress us, we who are supposed to be educated can use the language that was meant to suppress us to overcome that very thing. We can use the language to identify where we have problems, because the main problem that I believe myself is ignorance. Now that we are now aware of things, we can then use the very language to understand what those people that were trying to suppress us, what they knew, and then outperform them using their very language that they learned. That is one. And the second one, of course, is the education thing. You seem to be talking about education as something that you transmit to other people. And yet, if you go right down to the meaning of the word education itself, to educate, is you are trying to draw out things from people. So even though education, the colonial education was meant to oppress us, to suppress us, if we do the education, if we teach people properly by drawing out what they have in themselves, then we can bring out and overcome all the challenges that we have. So it's more of a comment, but I think that Mafole can comment about to those things that I've just said. Thank you very much, Ntate, and good evening to everyone. Thank you.
Hello, Ntate. Welcome. Thank you. Do you want to take the second question from Queen Portia, Ntate Mafole? Queen Portia, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Many greetings. Dr. Mafole, thank you so much for your presentation thus far. King Brother Coco, you know you hold a special place in my heart. So thank you so much for your opening presentation. What I'm struggling with, and let me go to the point of the doctor when he had on the slide, and let me make sure that I'm referencing the correct one, the iceberg. Out of all the slides, that one really resonated. I think it really said so much, that slide. I think it was the clearest of all of the professor's slides. So for example, take myself. Right now, I'm sleepy and I'm still listening to the presentation. I'm hungry. I'm still listening to the presentation. And then that 5% where I'm trying to do the critical thinking and I'm trying to analyze what the professor's saying, that one is being minimized even more because of, as I mentioned, being sleepy and hungry. So I just want to say that first to set the tone. What I have seen in many of our spaces, and this is the question I have for the prof, is that we are very good, and I know the prof said he's coming now to the solution after the questions, is we as Africans and African diasporas, we're very good at saying what the problems are. And then we are also very good at saying these are the solutions to those problems. I think we have that on point in all of the many circles I have been in. Now that, and that's why I'm going to be curious to hear what the doctor says about solutions, that has not translated into what the doctor is saying when he says you get to the something integrated experimental learning approach. All of that, figuring out the problem, identifying the problem, proposing the solution. It has not to date in the mass amount of what we need, Africans and African diasporas, the Ubuntu, what the doctor has said, it hasn't got there. And so my question is, how do we get there? Thank you, I yield.
Thank you, my sister. Ntate Mafole, we only have those two questions for now. So I suggest you respond to them. And maybe people will start raising their hands and asking questions.
Much, and thank you, Dr. Matutu. Yes, language is very important, and we need to use this very language that we are using to be able to understand what has done to us and how we can move out of it and even be better. And yet we still need to also use our own languages. There is a move now in education to try and indigenize learning. And I have contributed myself to a book where we promote and we find ways of bringing in multi-languages and multiple cultures. So it is important that we should not see the language as a hindrance all the time, which it should also be able to enable us. This is why I said that the program that we are talking about, that we are going to be showing as Queen Portia is talking about real solutions, that even in any language, I have presented this is a process in Sesotho to people who are not literate. But as I said, we need a requirement that some of the people who participate in the program should be able to read and write so that they can help others, because the processes are written down and then they can respond orally. Yes, education indeed is about drawing out things, learning out of people, because people already know things and they have to relate them so that they have to internalize. It is not just about putting things into people. But what we are going to be talking about, and I said we should take a break so that we can maybe interchange. We will now be moving into how to do that, how to enhance the processes of ensuring that people are actually learning and not just being taught. And yes, thank you very much for that input. Queen Portia, yes, the iceberg and the sleepiness. Yes, one is aware that even the time that we are presenting at is an awkward time when people have been through a difficult weeks, and it is at the end of the day. But one of the things is that presenting in a way that engages people and makes people to see actually how the complex things are interrelated is a method that we're talking about. I will be coming to the question of real solutions, not the superficial solutions that the coloniality education has been giving us. So just hang on until we get to where the solutions really are. I agree with you that most of the time we've been ranting about problems, complaining, and proffering solutions that the coloniality education expects us to proffer that do not solve our problems. So this is why This is why I also made mention of the transpersonal mental health perspective. I will be showing how it helps, how the new perspective helps. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ntate. There are no questions at the moment, but allow me to throw in a comment following Ntate Maputo's question. On the language, it's a huge one, but we cannot take it in isolation. So when we talk about the language, we talk about faiths or religions, we talk about names, we talk about all of those things which the invaders made the Africans hate of their own and instead embrace what the invaders brought along. And I know we can find a solution in any situation, any challenge, we can always find a solution. But in this case, as you will see, Africa is divided on language basis, not just its own ethnicities, which of course sometimes can play a huge, can be a huge barrier to that unity which we want. But now, when you look at the African Union itself, there are the French-speaking people and the English-speaking people. They are always fighting for influence within the African bloc. And besides that, then we find most of us are busy polishing the accents, getting the best accents that we can get in Africa, instead of looking for what is important. So Africa should be self-sustaining now, but we are not self-sustaining. We are hungry, yet we speak very good English and very good French. But look at China. Let's compare with China in this case. The Chinese embraced their Chineseness. They went back to their own philosophy and learned Confuciusness in their own language. Even the master they teach their children, they teach them in Chinese. All of these subjects, they teach them in Chinese and have managed to do it and rapidly transform to be the China that we see today. So it's not just to say, no, language is awful. No, language is good. But you should not replace your language, your Africanness. Don't sell your Africanness or the important things for the sake of language. That again is becoming an Englishman in a black skin or a Frenchman in a black skin. So that's what I refer to in my opener, if that helps. But Ntate Mafole, back to you. Quinta Pure, you have your hand up. Thank you. Welcome tonight.
Thank you very much. Yes, I have my hand up with regards to, I just want to make a comment on language. Just to point out that the English language that traveled from England, for example, to Scotland, because the Scots did not speak English, transformed itself to be relevant and to be usable by the Scots. So how English has survived is based on the fact that today's English has a reduced content of the English that came with the colonials, because English has adapted itself to the environment. So you will find that in English, our African expressions that they couldn't translate into English. In English, you've got Indian expressions. You've got all the languages where the English went and found things that they could not relate with are embedded in English. So my point is, Language is an instrument. This is why, for example, even when you being asked about which language you want to use, you now have American English, or I don't know, English, right? Because there are differences that will happen. So we shouldn't fear using English to express Ubuntu. We will create, language evolves. I'm not saying we need to renege on our own languages. No. Humanity has a capacity to learn many languages as long as they work to interact with the environment. So I just want to say, yes, we are in this difficult situation, but let's use the language to our own advantage. If you've had the opportunity to interact with West Africans when they're using English and they've adopted it to fit their circumstances and describe their environment and interact amongst themselves, then you appreciate that it's a language that's evolving. We will come up with our own English that the English don't understand, as long as it works for us and it expresses Ubuntu. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Queen. Ntate Mafole wants to come back. Go ahead, Papa.
Thank you very much. I think Metaphor has actually answered my question so well. Because not answered as such, but I agree with her so much that we should not find problems with language, but we should find how best we can use it and take advantage of that to our own. And there's another thing about language that we have to understand, that if you have got a good command of a language, any language, you can transfer whatever language, whatever concepts, whatever knowledge that you have into another language that you know it very well. And it is to our advantage to be knowing English, because that way we can get deep into the English, but they may not even get deep into ours. So it is always an advantage to know their language and use it to our best. But one of the things that I want to add about our education is that we blame language often and forget to say that actually the education system that we follow is actually the one that is faulty. Whatever that we teach these children, and I'm just looking at myself at here in Lesotho. I'm trying to write an article right now to try to explain why people failed the examinations that we have, the school living examinations. And when you look at that, you look at the policies that the had between 2008 and today. And so they came up with what they call qualification, Lesotho qualification framework. And all the policies that they have now, they are actually breaching that very framework. And then we expect these kids to pass the very matric that we're talking about. The point I'm making is that we ourselves are so confused. We, the so-called clever people, we, the so-called Dr. Matutus and the likes, are so confused that we are teaching these kids something that is completely confused, the bureaucrats, the government, adding everything into this thing. And by the time we finish, we don't have anything. So the teaching itself, we have to look at. We have to look at. And Ntate Mafole, you said something that I also find very important. There is what I think that Mafole might know, what you call the law of polarity, the law of opposites. That to anything, there are two sides. There's something good, there's something bad. Now we are talking about all these bad things about Africa. But if you really look at those things and you look at the opposite of that, what you have, if we have this terrible thing, there will always be a good thing out of that compares to that. So to any problem that we have now, there is a solution. And that solution will not come from outside. The solution will come from us. So we who were paid for by the Lesotho government, for instance, for our own countries to go and do PhDs, have to find the solutions. Nobody else from outside is going to find solutions for us. I think I'll stop there. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, King. Thank you. Did you want to respond, Ntate Mafole, or should I take a couple more hands?
No, I think it is inputs. We should thank Mayor Tapiwa and Dr. Makutu.
Okay.
And yourself, Chairperson, for the input that we made.
Thank you. Ntate Moepi and then Dumisani, that order. Go ahead, comrades.
Okay, thank you very much. I suppose you are hearing me. Am I audible enough?
Audible, my brother. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm also on language, and I realize that it has become a very interesting question or issue. Perhaps where I will be looking at it from would be from the development point of view. Perhaps just to give a short definition of development, that development is a sustained improvement of livelihoods of the majority of the population. Now, to the extent that the majority of the population is able to understand and appreciate what they should expect and what should be expected from them, I think language becomes central, becomes very critical. Otherwise, language is the way we communicate, the way we convey messages to each other. But if people are able to understand what is expected of them and what they should expect from someone else, I think I'm okay with any other language that can be used as long as people do appreciate it. But of course, one is aware of why we are talking about language to this extent. It is because we are now seeing ourselves, say, example here in Lesotho, where a parent would be talking or speaking English with their kids, whether at home or wherever they are, to a point that you might be tempted to ask, are you people Basotho or what? Because I think in as much as we know that English is a medium of exchange in or instruction in many schools, it is very critical that we start thinking seriously about the language to the extent of actually being sure that the majority of the people are able to be integrated into whatever it is that we are trying to do in terms of development. So I think that would be my input. Otherwise, language is just the way we communicate with each other. And whichever language we are able to communicate with is fine by me. Thank you.
Kim Dumizan.
Thank you so much, and greetings to everyone, and thank you so much to the Prof. Mafole. Metapu, I agree with you partly, but there's a part that I wanted us to also look at, particularly when Ntate Mafole will talk about, I suppose, that in language is not just the communication in a simplistic way of understanding, that there are many other things that are transmitted with the language. Your culture comes in, the tradition comes in as part of the language. Long as we understand that, as we obviously say, as we adapt our English to say there's a lot that we are losing in terms of the communication from a small child to an elder, with ours, even the words you choose have or transmit much, much more than getting the meaning of what it means. And it could also be that the conscious and the unconscious that Ntate Mafole will talk about is also transmitted, which is not obvious and something you see, but it could also be that the very same language transmits that, maybe even to the DNA. I saw a slide where he spoke the DNA, that the language is much more, long as we also appreciate the fact that we will adapt, we can adapt, we understand, but we lose much more in terms of the richness and much more that we are not conscious about in language. Thanks. Thanks.
Thank you. Before I allow Quinta Pure to come back, Ntate Mafole, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was saying maybe we should want to restrict our questions now so that maybe we can complete, because we still have some issues to raise and which have raised questions. How do we get to what solutions? How do we get to solutions? So maybe take the last hand and then we do the last part.
Thank you. Queen, you have the floor.
Thank you. My further comment is on the fact that I totally agree with all the sentiments that have been expressed. Language will carry culture, language will carry an attitude. I know from firsthand experience in Zimbabwe that we're struggling with some people who are denying their children the opportunity to speak their mother tongue in favor of English. That's a problem. But what I am saying is, as long as we are not afraid of a language, as long as we do not say we are not going to speak one or the other, it's not one or the other. You can speak any language. I can learn Zulu. Although I'm Shona speaking, I can learn French, but it shouldn't remove me from being the person that I am with Ubuntu. But our problem, particularly in Southern Africa, is because we were subjected to a regime that said, either you speak our language or you don't. And we had to fight to try and maintain our own languages, because that in the language is embedded our culture. So I totally agree. It's very important that we find ways that are relevant of transmitting our cultures and our philosophies through language. Even as technology develops, you can see that as we are interacting with technology, our languages need to adapt to it. And so do we. And I think that itself will help us to.
Oh no, we have lost the Queen.
I just.
Oh, you are there. Continue.
Yeah. No, I think I'll just sum up.
Yes.
What I was saying, we're coming from Southern Africa, where the British told us, or the Afrikaners told us, that we need to speak this language. This is the language. Any other is not relevant. So we were put to either accepting that language or not. Doors open for you if you were able to prove that you can speak that language. It was used in a political way. It was used to suppress us. But what we need to be aware of now that we are in this position where we are, that we cannot totally move away from it. This is why we're communicating today. We're taking advantage of this language to organize ourselves and to move ourselves forward. And that's when I'm saying we shouldn't be afraid to use it and to adapt it so that it serves our purpose. But I'm not saying we should not speak our own languages. We should. If it were possible, if I could wave a magic wand, would all speak Kiswahili and would all understand each other. And it would be a beautiful world, but we're working towards it. And as long as we agree, of course, because we also are known for swabbling to say which language should we speak. But that's besides the point. So I agree with everyone. Let's move with what we have and use what we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Queen. Ntate Mafole, over to you.
And thank you to all the inputs, Queen Tapiwa, Ntate Moepi. All of them are relevant, and I think we will be trying to respond to some of them with the following slides. Let's move on then and get closer to the human response mechanism. We are a tripartite system ourselves as human beings, with the soul, the body, and the spirit, and all of them feed into each other. And what we need to do now is, in trying to recover Ubuntu, we also look at how these these domains interrelate and how our education system has been dealing with them. The pictures we will be talking about before the end of this very slide, but because they will be disappearing, I'll want to start with the other parts of the presentation. The Eurocentric coloniality education has a biopsychosocial perspective. In other words, it addresses the body, the mind, and relations. And this is it. It's the psychological has got belief systems, perceptions, attitudes, mindsets, and behavior, which also feeds and interacts with the biological dimension, where we are looking at our biochemical systems. We've been looking at, we looked at the brain, the cell systems, we looked at the DNA and the organ system, the physiological system. But we also have the social dimension, which has values, cultures, traditions, circumstances, and human interactions. And this is how our education system has focused because of the limitations of science. Our science, even though it has helped us to develop a lot, has got limitations itself because it is only focused on this. Now, one of the issues that I would like to raise, very briefly, would anybody remind us what the snake said to the woman in the Garden of Eden? King Koko? Well, nobody's coming up. The snake said to the woman, eat of this fruit. And when the woman said, no, we are instructed not to eat of this fruit, we will die. The serpent says, no, it is because your creator knows that if you eat it, you will become like the creator. And yet, would the creator who created the human being in his own image and his likeness not want the human being to become like the creator? Isn't that contradictory? But that is what we are told the human being believed. And when the human being believed that in fear, then things went wrong. We believe in so many things that are contradictory, that do not help us, that put us into serious problems. And I want to stop at that and say we need to focus and to be attentive so that we can be able to discern whether or not what we are being given and what we are and what we should choose to take or not to take. There is a Sesotho legend of Mushanyana Sankatana. Maybe people will want to Google that up and read the full story. But my interest here is in this dinosaur devoured a whole community or a whole nation. And when it had done that, a young lady, expectant lady, managed to hide herself in a kraal and gave birth to a son who she read very competently, who grew up very fast. And the dinosaur, after devouring the whole community, then got stuck in this pass here. It could not go through here. And the boy grew up to kill the dinosaur and to free the people from inside. But when the people were being freed, they were crying that they were hating, that the knife or the spear that the boy was using was hating them. It is the same story about recovering Ubuntu. When we recover Ubuntu, people will have pain, but it is pain, it is a healing pain that we need to endure, but we also have to be cautious that we don't kill people in trying to help them to freedom. So what then, where are we now? We are at a point where now we want to expand. We need to expand, and we're actually expanding this limited perspective. We are expanding it to include even the spiritual perspective. When we include the spiritual perspective, we are able to realize that the whole person will now be impacted. This is what we call a holistic approach. when we have this holistic approach, everything is addressed. Science is only now coming to a point where it is able to, it can be able to measure even what happens at the experiential level, and which is the best education. People learn best. Even the science itself does say that learning is highest when it is experienced. And yet, the perspective that has been used has been limited to only the three dimensions, the psychological, the biological, and the social. And now, as I said, the transpersonal mental health perspective includes even the spirituality. It includes what we experience. What people experience when they are in Ubuntu is not something that current science is able to describe. But fortunately, now science is beginning to appreciate that. So how does this happen? The brain is divided into three parts. The right hemisphere that focuses on the big picture, visions and things. The left side that focuses on detail. And it is we either develop this by birth, nature, or by training. We inherit it, or we get our training. Training, for instance, of the artists develops this. They are able to envision. Some training, like the legal practices and others, make people to focus on the detail. The brain is also divided into the lower thinking brain and the higher thinking brain. This we share with other animals. Now, what happened was that this indicates how blood flows so that we are able to use those domains. When we balance these two, blood flows to all the dimensions, the right hemisphere, the left hemisphere, the lower brain, and the upper brain. That's when we are complete. We are using the whole brain. But things happened. We decided to create ourselves a punitive gods. We decided to enslave each other, put fear into each other. Then we also added with COVID. When this come in, what happens is blood that flows to the higher thinking brain gets constrained, and blood that flows to the fear center, the primitive brain, increases. And so even our decisions, we talked about the subconscious and the conscious mind and the non-conscious mind. We then start using a lot of fear to respond to our decisions. And when that happens, our performances are lowered, as we said. And we talked about this impact, the anosognosia, which is lack of self-awareness, lack of agency, where we feel like victims and we feel we cannot be able to do anything for ourselves. We get into destructive conflicts, as is currently the case. Our performances are reduced. How does this happen? Let's have a look at how this may happen. This is a principle of Ubuntu, how our founder was trained to know himself, know his people, and love them. And in life, what happens? We are presented with challenges, and we've been wired so that we can choose between fear and love. The choice is between honoring a feeling that we have about helping others, being responsive, giving to others what they need, and that is Ubuntu. But we can also choose from coloniality to self-betray, put ourselves inside the ego shell and shut ourselves inside there, and then believe that we are seeing even though we are enclosed in that cocoon. And then we begin to think of ourselves as victims, but also very competent, self-driven, hardworking, and important, sensitive, and we are great. We think others are lazy, are incompetent, they are poor managers, they are lousy workers. And when that happens, are we seen properly? Of course, not inside the darkness, not inside the cocoon. we are self-deceiving ourselves. We try to justify ourselves. We resist even new knowledge. We need others so that we can blame them. We need even the language that we are talking about. We need English to blame. We need the colonizer to blame for our own situation. When we need to change that, we are focused on ourselves. But when that happens, what do? We drive others into their own cocoons, and then we begin to collude against each other. People are complaining. The African diaspora in the Caribbean, in outside of Africa, are complaining that they find it very difficult to come into Africa. The regulations, border regulations, are not friendly. Why? Because we are sick of this self-betrayal. We are betraying ourselves. And what happens when we start colluding? We are colluding among ourselves. We are colluding with the colonizer. Then we lack commitment to our own selves. We make trouble for ourselves. All sorts of the problems that we have, all the societal problems that we have, we begin not to trust each other. We become suspicious. We become corrupt. We run into financial losses. We become poor. We get very sick. Right now, the mental sickness is on the rise. It's a pandemic of stress, pandemic of depression, and we have to deal with that. All that causes us these many problems that we have. This is a picture of what we saw a few years ago of a white man strangling a black man just for being in the street. And we need to get rid of that, because that is repression. Our coloniality skills make us to talk to others, not with them, to talk down to them. And it gives us very unsavory outcomes. It is repression. What we need to do is this Ubuntu. What does it do? Lift each other out of our problems and start collaborating in value-adding ways. When we start collaborating in value-adding ways, people will reciprocate, and we then become, we are in that Ubuntu, then, only then can we get that African unity that we are talking about. And so what do? Ubuntu helps us to do what? Ubuntu helps us, among others, to change from the punitive gods to a loving God, for those of us who are believers. But even for the scientific ones who are non-believers, we need to change from fear to love, because it does not matter whether you are spiritual or not. When we change, then practically what we do is, the processes that we need to do, that which we are talking about, is increase the blood that flows to the higher thinking brain and reduce the blood that goes to the fear centers. And when that happens, then our problems begin to diminish. We begin to have powerful communities. We begin to have integrity, harmony, and improved performances. How does that happen in practical ways? We are wired for fear and love. Our brain is divided into two, for fear and love. So when we get a challenge, very quickly a message is sent to the fear center through this very short brain pathway, so that we can respond quickly if we are in danger. But that is the situation that we are currently in, where we are just reacting to situations primarily. This is why even the SDGs are said to be off track. But long-term repression has locked us into this type of situation. And what we need to do is to learn to use the other brain pathway that deliberately goes to the higher thinking brain, and which will then, late after having thought properly of responses to our situations and not fearfully, then we stop the fear, the quick fear reaction, and respond properly. When we do that, then we will get the type of future that we are looking for, where there is potentiality for Ubuntu, for where there are great relations and performances. It also enables us to be able to understand that human beings are created to learn by mistake, to learn by trial and error. So help each other so that when we appreciate, we know other people, we know how we are designed, we are created, then we are able to appreciate others better. And that is how then we get to the Ubuntu. The other part that has been locked away, has been locked in our minds, is to lock us into the thinking mind, which is responsible for less than 10%. That is what long-term repression did. What we need to do, as we said, is to get out of this coloniality education and be able to also use the higher thinking brain, metacognition, where we are able to stop and think about how we are thinking and also to learn how to learn and be responsive. And that only comes out of love. When that happens, then we are able to ask ourselves life-giving questions. Who am I? Who should I be? In other words, my vision. How can I become my ideal self? And how can you also become, how can I help you to become your ideal self? And this is how the processes happen. Moving from the attractive coloniality here, which we said was leaving us in very murky swamps. Moving away from there, we want to move into where we get holistic education and we get nutritional fruits. How do we move out of that to this new era? By what I've called civil learning communities, by developing this Ubuntu. How do we develop it? We create conducive learning environment, as I talked about at the beginning, the first slide, that we need to create a conducive environment. When we have created a conducive environment, then we can only start learning new things. When we learn the new things, what happens is we are looking at the genes again. Inside the genes, there is something like a railroad onto which, when we learn and repeat things, chemicals flow, proteins flow and write. This is how that rewriting of the genes happens. Proteins write new messages on the surface of the genes. And when we repeat that, it start becoming long-term memory. But if we stop repeating that, then this protein dissipates and becomes heat energy, not information energy anymore. It dies. But if you continue to repeat, as we said, our neurons begin to develop flowers. But then remember, we said that flowers need what? Flowers need bees in order to cross-pollinate. When we get those bees, which is the processes that we are talking about, then we are writing longer-term memories. And when that happens, then we repeat, we begin to get fruits. And we don't know exactly how much the crop will be, but we wait with patience, we wait with detachment, but providing the necessary nutrients, training, repeating, using the languages that are the proper languages that we talk about, using also the mother language as a priority. But let's look at what happens. When we are in coloniality, our brains are like toxic brains. They have a lot of toxic. They are like that apron that we need to clean. So how do we work on it? Maintenance. How does that translate? The process of a Dr. Carol Leaf has 5 steps of detoxing. How do we detox? Think about something that you need to change, a belief that you need to change. That is the step that she calls gather. And when you've brought it to consciousness, focus on it and then write it down. When you write it down, it is like you are arraying your own brain on a piece of paper and looking at it. Just watch what happens here at the brain on the right of the screen. what happens to the dead? As you keep doing this process bit by bit, as we said, then what do you see there? The dead begins to dissipate. You repeat, you focus again, see what you are changing. Is it useful? What are you changing into? How are you replacing it? And then it is like you clean your brain. It is like you clean your apron and you start practicing. Like athletes. Athletes don't just read once, don't go to an examination only once. They keep practicing. Even what they know, they keep training again. And as King Koko said, it is like husua, scrubbing. You soak your dirty apron, you scrub it, you rinse it, and that is the process that happens to the brain. That is the process that is called neuroplasticity. And people talk about neuroplasticity, they just talk about it and they think that when they have mentioned it, then it happens, when it actually requires work. So how does that happen? In Sesotho, when a new baby is born, a reed is planted or is drawn outside the house so that people can stay away and not bring infections to the young baby. The young baby begins to develop the brain halfway in the belly, and when they are born, up to 2 years, the brain is vibrating at a frequency that is like a sponge. The baby's brain is like a sponge, and they grow. It is still spongy, but not as receptive as it was at the beginning. Here they receive by hearing and watching. And at a later stage, the age is programmable. So this is an area where a lot of that language should be used. And we talked about mother tongue. This is where mothers become very important. Mothers become very important because then what they do is these are later stages when the brain is not receiving anything that easily, when it requires effort to learn. But at this stage is here, at the critical window that I call the Sankatana parent talk. Sankatana, remember, is that mother who who nurtured her baby to go and relieve the community out from the dinosaur. Dr. Diana Saskind says that there are 3 T's that need to be used here. She says, when your baby is born, even before they are born, up to their 3 years, is a very critical age where you've got to tune in to watch what the baby is taking interest in and then talk to that person. Whatever they are doing, if there's an opportunity to talk about mathematics there and figures, talk about them. If there are things to talk about laws or engineering, talk about those things. That is the responsibility of the mother. They should equalize, be at the level of the baby. And then you have to also to what? Take turns. Make sure that you watch what your baby is doing and then talk to them about what they are doing. Give them lessons about what they are looking at. And when you do that, the best way is to do it in mother tongue, because that is the language that the mother understands more. And when you do that, when you are talking to the baby, a lot of words, what you are doing is building their vocabulary. Even though they are not understanding, you are building a vocabulary that they will use for later thinking in their lives. And it is so very critical that in this 3 years, even though initially she had said you should talk 30 million words, just talk a lot. 30 million words is not quite practical. And she's aware of that herself. But another important factor is the baby should be taken for ear testing inside the first 3 months so that we can see whether they are able to hear. If they are not able to hear, maybe the cochlea is not healthy. They should get a cochlear implant, which can only happen effectively when it is done inside 3 months. So Dr. Diana Saskind will help us with these 3 T's. So mothers should go and find out even caretakers about how that is done. Very quickly now, moving towards the end, we need to envision. We need to think about our life purpose. I said that for me, Ubuntu is also purpose-bound. So you have to start thinking about why you are here. Those questions that we said we should ask ourselves, why we are here, repeat them. As you repeat them, you propagate them into the outer infinite intelligence. As you propagate them, they piggyback on the collective unconscious mind, on the universal mind. They piggyback on the infinite mind. And as you repeat, they get stronger. They get stronger and stronger. And as you repeat, then you will begin to get answers to what your purpose is, to what your vision is. You begin to know yourself. You begin to love yourself. And because we are social beings, we do that in collaboration with others. How do we relate? This is other people here. I've taken 2 people here. And this is myself here with my dream, my big dream, which is what I'm sharing here. My big dream is that of social healing, transformation, and effective leadership. And when I think about that and repeat it, it becomes a long-term memory in my subconscious, in my non-conscious mind. I begin to start realizing the need to collaborate with others. And when I do that, I propagate my thoughts. Others are also doing the same. You are doing the same yourself. When you propagate your thinking, what happens? My own vision gets propagated into the collective unconscious. In the collective unconscious, what happens again? It gets propagated, it starts looking around, it finds you, which is why we are together here. It finds you and we meet. And when we meet and we keep repeating what we are talking about, our visions become stronger. Our visions become stronger and stronger and stronger. This is what Deepak Chopra calls synchro destiny in his book titled Synchro Destiny. So read that and understand exactly how this synchro destiny happens, how your vision gets translated, how it becomes, it happens to interact with other people's visions and the thoughts of the universe, and how then it gets manifested. But then we need to be ready. We are nearing the end now. We need to be ready. People need to be ready for this Ubuntu. People need to be ready for the African unity. People need to be ready for global collaboration. And I have looked at 2 models here. What I find very critical, other people talk about structures. What we are talking about here is the psychological and cultural and the spiritual also, even though the spiritual I have not highlighted here. There are 2 models. What happens to them is, how are people thinking at the start before even we talk about this Ubuntu thing? What are they thinking about? How do you interact with them? How do you get them to contemplate this Ubuntu that we are talking about? How then do you prepare them for Ubuntu? What actions do you get into? This is where, Queen Portia, we begin to come to the solutions, the actions. We are going to be talking about the actions. How then do we maintain that? We talked about maintenance of plants. How then do we help to transfer this into the next generation? In the last slide, we talked about how mothers should rear their babies. But there's another model that we have used. Oh, something has gone wrong here. Excuse me. Excuse me, let me get back to the slide, the proper slide. Okay, there we are. We went through this one. This is the second part of readiness. In this readiness, again, what we need to do is to look at how people may accept or reject this issue of Ubuntu. Some people think they are okay with the coloniality mentality. because for them, something is going wrong here. Excuse me. Let me do that verbally. It is like grief. People who have looked at how we respond to grief say that we start by denial, denying that we need to change. We start by getting angry that we don't want to change. But then with time, when we start nursing the situation steadily, as we said earlier, as we said in this slide here, then people begin to want to change. And when they begin to start to change, then what we use ourselves is what we call the holistic integrated experiential learning approach. We plan, talk about how Ubuntu will change our lives, what we need to think afresh of, prepare to learn new things. We are learning new things now. We are learning about the mind. Many people are not taught, schools do not teach about the brain, and yet everybody must know about their brain. We need to learn how to learn together as we are doing now, but then we need to get into action. This theory that we've talked about is not enough. We need also to be able to take time to contemplate, to envision, to reflect, and also to internalize the learning and transfer. We need, I will do this manually now. I think something has gone wrong with my program here. The process leads us. This is an African derived way of dialogue where people sit under a tree to dialogue. They have put it, they have transcribed it now into a modernized system where people sit in a circle so that people can see each other's eyes. But what we are looking at here is building Ubuntu, building a civil learning community. A civil learning community is a group of, an inclusive group of fearless people who become ethical servant leaders, who change themselves and submit to a higher power that is more knowing, more objective, and more caring than them. People who have learned how to learn together, how to learn, as you said, and think about their own thinking. People who learn how to change themselves, how to change their environment and their context. People who have learned how to communicate honestly with each other. People who have developed relations that go deeper than the usual masks of composure, where we pretend to be smiling when we are actually being very deceptive. People who have learned how to commit themselves to significantly to rejoice with each other, to mourn with each other, to delight in each other, and to take each other's situation as their condition as their own. People who develop their authentic leadership and effective leadership, who become servants. Each one of us must be a servant because we can only live by being able to serve others. That's how we will be able to be helped ourselves. And when we have developed this Ubuntu, in Ubuntu, we are able to exude a lot of energy that comes from sources that we did not even know we have. We are able to do things that we never thought we could be capable of. And that is what Ubuntu is useful for. It has got outcomes. And the example that we have is that of Kim Mosuoe, the first who founded the Basotho Nation. He was like us, he was a rogue like us, using the spear very much in those ages. But then he was advised, he was trained, he was advised to go and consult and be trained by a healer and a sage, Morena Mohloni, who then taught him, remember the maxim I talked about, know your people, love them, who was taught that and trained into it, not just told, trained and groomed to develop that. And when that happens, they develop what I call quality peace. And quality peace is where everything is done that promotes improvement of life conditions and quality of life. where everything has components of dignity that values diversity of people, their equality, their excellence, that helps them to excel, that helps them to participate actively. Where people are made to feel safe, where people are helped to be self-confident, where people are helped to have confidence in their environment, where people are helped to become leaders, effective leaders. And that means that leaders then become trusted and governments get trusted, unlike right now, where people are free from want, are free from fear. And this is the Ubuntu that we are talking about. And how do we do that? To summarize now, there are processes that help to narrow the blood vessels that take blood to the fear center and widen the vessels or the veins that take blood to the higher thinking brain. Those processes are processes that are available that we will share with you later. Even the chairperson maybe will talk about them a little bit. But what have we been saying? We said that the life that we are leading now is pushing us long-term repression, is forcing us into chronic stress and mass psychosis, the situation that we're in of depression, where we commit suicides, where we are poor, where we murder each other. It is like a valley of darkness. In that valley of darkness, we live in cocoons and we collide. And what we need is to develop.
Good afternoon, how are you?
And what we need is love that comes from, we talked about the scalar energy. Read about scalar energy and the man who's called Tom Paladillo, who talks about scalar energy as consciousness, and it is energy that can be used even to heal people. And when that happens, we are able to break our own cocoons. We are able to do what? We are able to go over the value of darkness using holistic healing of memories, holistic healing of psycho-spiritual wounds, and building Ubuntu, building civil learning communities. When that happens, Archimedes said a long time ago, give me a place to stand. A place to stand is like what we have our elders build, the pyramids. Says, give me a lever long enough. That lever long enough is the Ubuntu. And that lever can help us to move the world. And when we do that, we invite others to join us. We look back using the Sankofa principles that the chairperson talked about, to turn back to our old ways, to Kemet, where we came from, to Ma'at, the principles of our old gods. We turn back to the teachings, the trainings, the healings of Muhloni. And when that happens, we get born again, we are able to embrace each other. Our Ubuntu will shake the world. Our Ubuntu will help us to deliver the Africa we want. It will help us to deliver to ourselves the world that we want. But as we said, Queen Portia, it is not just this words, it is not this theory, it is the actual practice, the actual training, which will help us to transform. And it is only when we are ready for that transformation that things can happen. King Koko and you, my excellencies, thank you very much. I know I've taken a long time, but as I said, the idea was only to bring awareness of what is needed and also to try and inspire some motivation into us that even though we may be already achieving a lot of things, maybe we have gone to school, we are educated, as Dr. Makutu said, we are doctors, we are called professors and what, but we need to transform. I have had my own journey. One time, maybe we'll have time, I will share with you my transformation, where I moved from, because I have actually come a very long way. King Gogo, thank you for the lengthy presentation. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, Ntate. Thank you very much. I'm conscious of time, but I know there are questions and comments from members who have been following you intently on these slides. Queen Portia, you had a question before. Do you want to come with that question for Ntate Mafole?
Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you so much. As you mentioned, this is your presentation, and thank you for that acknowledgement. That right there shows me your humility, that your presentation is more of an introduction rather than looking into the how, though you have described later in the slides. So I appreciate you saying that honestly. I want to acknowledge that, and I want to acknowledge the time that you have taken. This is a lot of information, and we have to appreciate people who have that wisdom with knowledge. And so I want to do that. And my question now, please, Prof, is going to be more critical of a question. And then I ask you if you may to answer it. So I have talked with a lot of different people, and one of the things that coming out is mental health challenges. We've heard it of late, during COVID, before COVID, this word narcissistic personality disorder. And of course, I am not a psychiatrist or psychologist. I am not any medical person. I don't claim to be. So the people who come to me, because there are people who come to me for advice, they have given me examples of what they are going through. So for example, a person who clones their phone. And now that person, they have cloning phones, by the way, globally is illegal. Yet the allegation that the person has cloned their phone, so that person now is looking at all of the private messages of that person. Another example, and I'm coming to the question because I'm mindful of time. Another example is where you have a stepfather, and this is not unique to men, a stepfather who is who is now married to a person. So that woman has children, and that stepfather is raping the daughter of that mother. And when the daughter is trying to come to the mother to say, this person is raping me, the mother says, think positive. And then there's another case currently of allegations that there is a leader who is well appreciated, well respected, but this leader has allegedly caused harms. Some of them is related to sexism, allegedly. Some of them is related to this narcissistic personality disorder. Again, these are allegations. So what is happening to your last slide, which you just mentioned, Pro, is that you have in this situation a lot of mental health challenges. And whereas the Ubuntu concept, and this is the question, is saying love and welcome all, does the Ubuntu concept tolerate and enable harmful behaviors like sexual abuse, like sexism, like violation of privacy? With this, I yield.
Ntate Sematlane or anyone else to take us?
Yeah. Yes, we have serious challenges, hence the need for recovering our Ubuntu. You've given examples of the harm. And this is all the reason why we need to seriously work on the recovery. Not just for ourselves, but even for those very sick people, because the behaviors that you are talking about are behaviors of very sick people. Narcissism comes out of excessive fear. Ignorance comes out of excessive fear. Corruption comes out of excessive fear. Abuse comes out of excessive fear of people who do not know themselves, who do not love themselves, and therefore cannot know others and appreciate others. And it is, as you can see, it affects all of us. It also affects even the mother that you gave an example of, that the mother, instead of looking after the child and protecting the child, wants her to be appreciative in something like that. But these behaviors have got to be dealt with. The coloniality mentality has given us the legal systems to deal with those. We need to deal with these things. Even in our traditional ways, there used to be ways of dealing with wayward people. But at the end of the day, we need a very serious social healing program. And as I said, the current Eurocentric coloniality perspective is limited. Hence, we still have these problems. So when we expand it to include that spiritual domain, it then becomes more effective because all of these things derive from there. So what I can say is it emphasizes whence you emphasize the agency of the call for recovering of Ubuntu. No, Ubuntu cannot tolerate behaviors like those. It cannot. And yet we need not to throw away the baby with the bathwater. We need to throw out this behavior, but also to look after the root cause. The reason why I gave the example of that Morena Mutlomi and Mosuoe, founder of the Basotho Nation, is that when cannibals in those times where of destitution and conflict, when cannibals devoured Mosuoe's beloved great grandfather, instead of simply killing them, he looked at the root cause of their problem. Then what he did was he gave them seas, he gave them animals, he gave them land, integrated them into his young nation, and helped to develop them to recover humanity. And ever since, there have not been any cannibals here in Lesotho. And it's painful. Remember, I gave the example of that of the Mshanyana Sankatana mythological legend of Basotho, of the dinosaur, that as we try to heal, there will be these painful things that we need to deal with. And there will be pain, there will be healing pain, but we need to enjoy it. When I talked about readiness for change, unfortunately, we could not show the whole slide. Something went wrong with the system. But one of the things is we need to overcome the pain of healing because it is essential. The pain of healing is less than the pain that we undergo with these problems, because these problems keep deepening as we watch them, or as we give superficial solutions, as you suggested earlier in your initial question. So there is agency for healing and agency for recovering Ubuntu. What I will do is, King Koko, I'm going to, as I said earlier at the start of the presentation, I'm going to complete the paper and incorporate these insights and the responses to the questions that have been raised in here. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, King. Just to add, Queen Portia Ubuntu doesn't just accept that everyone is human. You are a human, but there is reciprocity. There is reciprocity, and there has to be a redress for all the wrongs before anyone is accepted back into the society in which they are from. So Ubuntu is a collective humanism that enables a collective to hold each other to account. So in the case of a stepfather who is misbehaving the way he is misbehaving, there would have been a council of men that would have been there to take care of that behavior. The men will be there to take care of misdemeanors amongst the men, and the women will also be there expected to take care of misdemeanors among the women. But in a society in which we live now, we have removed our Ubuntu and delegated it to the law making organizations, the police, everything else. And the police will just take that person, take them to court. The court will find them guilty and put them in prison, jail. No one follows up to see if that person was being reformed. But in the African-centered justice that we pursued then, we made sure that you corrected and came back into the society. Thank you. I see your hand is up, Queen Tapua. Go ahead, please.
Yes. Thank you very much. Those are difficult examples that we've been given. But I would like to go back to the understanding of Ubuntu. Ntu or Nu, in whichever language we're looking at across the African continent, refers to being, existence. Ubuntu, in order to be, to exist, one has to be with other people. In other words, you cannot be, you cannot exist without that connection. So, with the examples that we've been given, with the presentation that we've been to diagrammatical quarters in the circle that we presented, where we've got the biological, the psychological, the social, and the spiritual. This is how I see things. The Eurocentric way of seeing things starts with the biological and psychological. It's more individualistic. Whereas Ubuntu, because we're saying you can't exist outside the social, outside the group, we emphasize on social and spiritual. One of the first things that came out when the Europeans came to the continent is we have things that we didn't have prisons. They were amazed at the way we dealt with offenders.
I'm sorry, I'm finding it difficult to hear what you're saying. You're breaking up, and I'd really like to hear you.
I'm hoping it's going to take itself out. What I'm saying is, when what we're looking at, different is collective. The Eurocentric way of seeing things is individualistic. They're starting from the biology, psychology. The social group, there's less emphasis as you get there, social and spiritual. Whereas is starting with the social spiritual. In other words, we exist for each other. The fact that you are being, the process of existing has to be with other people. You cannot exist on your own. So, of things that are going awry. I was just saying, they were surprised when they came to Africa and they did not see prisons. Of course, crimes are committed, but it's the understanding of being that helps people to cooperate. When we look at the African context, we're looking more at collective responsibility of the group. It could be responsibility of the family, could be responsibility. There is corporate responsibility in Ubuntu. In other words, one is responsible for the crime or the good that the other person has done. Therefore, when we have a father who is abusing, or an adult who is abusing the father, we've lost their sense of being, starting with the spirit, because in the context, we don't look at the person as being a biological being, it's spiritual being. And when you're committing a crime, you're not committing a crime against the individual, you're committing a crime against the spirit. And so the group and the spirit of once we lose that, once we lose the, and not just who we are in terms of individual, I am you or me, when the offense is committed against everybody, and there's corporate responsibility, which is, for example, in places in Africa where somebody goes to the chief's court and someone has been murdered. In my part, is the whole family takes responsibility. You are all fined because of the one person who has committed the crime. So what this means is the burden of responsibility of behavior management is not with the courts. It's not with the people who manage. It's within the family. Because I know if I commit an offense, everybody is going to suffer the consequences, especially at a spiritual level. So when we're talking about Ubuntu, we're talking about practicing things. We're talking about practical consequences. We're talking about me looking at you and saying you're my brother in a genuine sense, that we are locked spiritually, that we are locked socially. And I won't attack you. I will love you. I've got to end there.
Wow, Queen, that was beautiful. Unfortunately, they sabotage us there in Zimbabwe. The connection, as usual, is shaky. But this is a start, hopefully, of something greater. We will have platforms like this in which you come, and hopefully the network will be better in the future. And I'm glad you are here, because you not only are bringing forth your upbringing in Ubuntu society, you also are bringing the lived experience from here, as well as your training your training, your educational training. So I'm grateful. That day Makutu had his hand up. Is he still there?
I'm still here, but
Go ahead.
I was worried that mail taking so long. Mine is more of comments, but Ntate Mafole can comment to them. Well, it's a question as well, that she seems to present Ubuntu here as an alternative to colonialism. And I'm not sure whether there would be any other ways that would overcome this. And secondly, I think he made some comments about the artificial intelligence that it might replace us. And my comment to that is actually in his own response or in his presentation, that the biggest problem that we may have people is that is fear. And fear is the result of ignorance. Because there's no way that AI can replace a human being. There's no way that it can replace teachers, because it is created by human beings, and human beings cannot outsmart themselves in other other words. So there will always be something that is short. So to me, therefore, people will never get obsolete one way or another, as long as they understand that this, the IE or anything that people make is a human creation, and therefore it will never surpass a human. And lastly, I think my comment is, I'm not going back to the debate about languages and such, but I'm saying that when we talk about these things, we talk about so much about our differences as Africans. They're so different. Therefore, we need English as a common language. We need that as a common language. And we seem to forget that apartheid itself, or colonization, or whatever that is happening in the US, where people are being marginalized and that kind of thing, is based on people's differences. And yet people have so much in common. We as Africans, one of the basic things that we have in common is that we are all Africans. We just spoke as Ubuntu as one of the traits that we have. So why do we then want to focus on the differences? And yet we have so much in similarities that we can work with, and yet we do not use that. And lastly, we talk when Ntate Mafole spoke about it, but this argument, because I am a teacher myself by profession, that when we teach these kids in schools, we tend to put so much emphasis on, I think when you spoke about those 4 dimensions, we look at only on the cognitive side of education. And yet education is about developing a human being. I think Ntate actually spoke about it nicely. You are developing a human being. And Ntate Mafole said you are developing a whole being. Now, developing a whole being, you are dealing with the intellect of the person, you are dealing with the physical side of the person, you are dealing with the emotional side of this person, and you are dealing with the spiritual side. Whether you believe in God or you don't believe in God, but there is something that people have that seems to be beyond people's understanding. We talk of telepathy. So somehow you know something is going to happen, and it happens exactly that way. You can't explain it, but it happens. The science that we do that cannot explain it. So when we talk about education, therefore, trying to draw out from people, we should look at it not only on the cognitive side, but also on developing the whole person so that he becomes whatever that man is. I think that is my contribution to the whole talk. And I thank you very much. I got lost somewhere in between for some time. I don't know what happened to my phone. So you might have touched on some of this, but I think I myself thought that I learned quite a lot from this presentation itself. And I thank you, Ntate Mafole, at the end, all the organizers and everybody that is listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ntate. Before I come to you.
Can I speak?
Go ahead, Ntate. I was going to ask for someone else to speak, so yes, go ahead.
Okay. Yes, thank you, Ntate. Well, I think we have touched quite a wide spectrum of what Ubuntu is and is all about and so on. I would just want to take a part on the question of education. You know, when the colonizers wanted to capture us, they did that through our minds. And they did not want to see anything that could compete with their kind of education they were planning or they were instituting with us. So one of the first things that they actually fought and attacked among us, at least here I think in Southern Africa as such, and it could very much be the same with all the other African countries, that as a Black nation, you have this tradition of what do you call it? We call in Sesotho, it is lebollo. But I think in English, it is explained like it is a transition. And this kind of education is the one that is given to young people as they grow from being young people to being adults. In other words, Basotho used to do that when they were now preparing for women to be women and men to be men. And they have this transition of lebollo in order to teach them the very concept of Ubuntu, or the very concept of Botho. What is Botho? What are you expected to do? How do you connect with other people? How do you take care of them? How do you serve them? How and so on and so forth, including, of course, during those times there were a lot of wars, and people were fighting each other. So they were even taught how to. Boys were taught how to fight. They were taught how to make weapons like the spears and so on, and build the shields and so on from cow hides and things. So the whole of that thing, the white men actually attacked, to the extent that even when you the so-called Christians, if your son would go to the Lebollo or the transitional school, then you'll get cut off from the church. That was now making people to fear and try to keep their children away from getting that education. And now, you see, that was very important, because the education of Ubuntu was actually based on the people, from the families level to the society and so on. That education. And that education was more of a practical approach than the so-called theory. And that is where now at that level, now a man with Ubuntu and a woman with Ubuntu were being fashioned out by our people. I believe it is the same thing with the other Black nations. They have that kind of transition from young people to being grown up or adult people. So in other words, I'm trying to say that education becomes very important to effect all of these changes that we may need to be doing to actually educate about Ubuntu, because up until this point now, many of our people have lost it, because we are now shrouded with this white mystic kind of life that we are doing. Somebody was laughing when I was saying we are fake nations, because you don't know whether you are actually Mosotho or you are a white man, because you want to live like a white man. You don't, at the second point, you want to live like a Black man. And so we tend to be running somewhere in between, and we need to get rid of that. We are Africans, we are Black, our land is Africa, and we have to start driving towards that. So education is where now these colonizers attacked and conquered us, and it is where we have to liberate ourselves from. One other point about Ubuntu was that does it give a life? Because Ubuntu is taken also to be the way of life. And does it give life? And you find that, yes, it does. Because you have basic principles of Ubuntu in life. that talk about equality, equity, sharing, and also sharing in such a manner that you are not putting forward this idea of a profit, but you are putting forward the idea of a human life progressing. And also that we have what we call social justice in Ubuntu, which is the principle that takes care of many other things that may not be or that may be negative to many people, and then we deal with those things in the social justice. And also another justice is that of what you call restorative justice. This one, it does two things. It looks at the crime. May was talking about a very, very bad crime of somebody raping young girls and so on. That is very, very bad. I'm feeling chilled with that every time when I hear it, because this is not the first time I hear about it. But those things, now you'll have the punitive justice, you'll have this restorative justice, in which case we are saying that the courts should be weighing between the damage done to the victim in terms of how can that damage be reversed. And part of the reversing that damage would be that which is saying restorative. For instance, for the girl has been raped, and they go to court, and the man goes to prison. That's all. It's finished. But now the pain, the healing, the loss of the child being molested in that manner, and the people, the relations to the child are also, and that thing has not been taken into account. So if we in Ubuntu, we have to take that into account so that we find what can be restored in the damage that the crime has actually done to the victim. So those are the kind of things which I was saying. Maybe we can look at how we use the education, how would we actually see or find how Ubuntu can help us in our socio-economic life, and also that, well, these other things are very important to us, actually, because they show what kind of life we have been living before, when we were living in a Ubuntu kind of way. Would be talking things like everybody must be listened to. We have community gatherings or pitals, but in those pitals, we say that everybody must be listened to. And then we are saying anybody at the pital can talk, actually, because they say whatever they say will be important to what is being discussed there. So Ubuntu is also inclusive in nature, so that everybody feels that they do matter in the lives of other people and so on. So these were the kind of things which one thought maybe we could actually put forward. to show actually the life of Basotho during the time of Mosuoe, which includes things like, I don't know what you call this in English, matsema. Matsema are community gatherings that help each other, particularly in the fields, either, collecting, what is it, in reaping in the fields, and also things like that was mentioned.
Communal farming.
Harvesting.
Or something, communal farming. We have also things like le cielo. I don't know what you call that. That le cielo means that I give an animal to somebody who needs it, to help that person. But that person, is that lending? Yeah, I think I lent that animal, particularly female. It would be cows, it would be sheep, and so on and so forth. So that is how we used to say help each other come out from, say, poverty and so on. I lent that animal to them. It bears other animals there, and they remain with the other animals. It comes back with at least one more animal when it comes back to me, even if it leaves 3 there or 4, but it will come back with one animal. So that kind of thinking and mentality has been wiped out. We don't have it right now, because right now everybody is looking at himself or herself, and we have lost the quality of actually serving, living to serve other people, living to serve other people. So these are the kind of things that we need to take back, and also now to put them in a position that they will be able to answer today's necessities, today's changes of high technology and things like those. But the principles are still applicable even today. It is a question of how do we shape them to work in the today's environment. That is about as short as I can go with my contribution.
Thank you, Mtau. Thank you very much. I'm conscious of time, and I know that this Sematlane has to be somewhere, and Queen Teresa in another session. So it looks like we will really have to have another session, maybe in another couple of weeks' time. But in this case, Ntate Thabiso, I would like to have you, and Ntate Chris, if Ntate Chris is available, we'll talk to another Ntate Chris to talk about matsema, some of those things which the Africans did to help one another, which the invaders destroyed intentionally. So we'll probably have to have another session at another time. So King Dumizane and then Queen Tapua, in 1 minute each, please. Okay.
Is it me, Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. No, thank you so much. It's comments, not questions. What is interesting in what Ntate Mafole has mentioned, for me as a takeaway, is not a question, comment, is the fear that it looks like fear was used in education, in religion, in law, in social, such that it traps us. But the other side of it, it's love, and where this Ubuntu comes in, because our Ubuntu is encapsulates a lot of love. But the point that I want to make is that it looks like our understanding of Ubuntu is different, particularly when you look at our colleagues, like when Queen Portia, the question that he asked, to saying we seem to understand when Queen Tapua spoke about Ubuntu, we seem to all understand, especially those ones here in Africa, because we seem to understand. But what we seem to be missing is that our other colleagues in the diaspora doesn't have a thorough an understanding that we have of Ubuntu. That's why she came up with this question, which for me says we must develop it thoroughly so that we have a common understanding and use it, because this is the dimension that deals with love particularly, so that we all have that common understanding of love. That's why the question where she talks about this, and she ended by asking to saying, is this what Ubuntu encompasses of that man? I mean, so that tells us that we must develop it more and use it as a tool so that everybody understands it, so that we marry it or compare it or put it or juxtapose it with the current laws and everything that are used to say, no, Ubuntu have got this, because we have a common understanding of it, but not everyone understands it the same way. So I believe we should take it up academically and everything, so to develop it as a serious concept to just oppose it against the current. Thanks. I think my 1 minute, Chair.
Thank you, King. Tapio.
Right, thank you very much. I think I'll just follow on from what my brother has just said, because I feel so schizophrenic in my existence. On one side, if I need to act European, I will act European. On the other, if I need to act Ubuntu, I'll act Ubuntu. And it's just, it will send you mad round the bend. But what I want to point out right now is education. We've got the challenge of bringing Ubuntu into a classroom, because Ubuntu is being. How do you bring the concept of being into a classroom? In the African context, values are passed to children in the process of being. Now our challenge is, how do we teach inclusivity, restorative justice, cooperation, and corporate responsibility in a classroom setting, given the curricula that we have? Because according to the European type of education, the formal education, the Europeans set out to control, to fashion for their purposes, for exploitation, for self-control, and for competition. Because when we award children in a class and give them a position, we're encouraging competition. We're not encouraging Ubuntu. We're encouraging people to beat their own chests and say, I've got a first class, you have a third class. We need to be really conscious of how, as educators and as people, we drive the Ubuntu forward. I think for now, I agree that we need another session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Queen. Thank you. There are two more hands that they are, unfortunately, and I can't deny them being the Ubuntu that I am. So, Queen Teresa and Brother Abdul Latif, 1 minute each, one of you, please, and then we close. We'll have to come back again in 2 weeks' time. Thank you. Queen Teresa?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thank you, Queen.
Okay. Professor Mafole, this session has been so tremendous. I don't want to add anything to it that's going to dip it. But I do believe that the brother who spoke should really take back what he said about the diaspora, because we are spirit and it's not location. So I think he's misunderstood your lesson today. And I think it's imperative that he needs to understand it. I am from the diaspora and I am not going to accept what he said. So I don't want to dip it, but I do want to mark it. Thank you.
Brother Abdul Latif.
Free the land. How everybody doing? I'm glad to be allowed to listen to the presentations. I think that they were pretty much good presentations. One thing I want to say is that education is very important. Education about Ubuntu is critical, but Ubuntu needs to be implemented in all aspects of our lives and on every level of society simultaneously. We living in highly complex and developing countries in cities where there's a lot of processes that needs to be established and geared towards implementing Ubuntu. I know it was spoke about in a lot about fear and love, but we mainly have a duality or dichotomy going on in the world of good versus evil, right? And some people are motivated not by ignorance nor by fear, right? Maybe poverty or some other evil incarnation that's coming and developing by a perversion of their free will, and we have to be able, Ubuntu is able to deal with that, and we have to understand that Ubuntu don't allow a person to corruptively oppress and abuse other people. The community comes against it, those in authority comes against it, and whether you're acting as a collective in a deliberative body or you acting as an individual over a corporation, nonprofit or whatnot, you still are to implement an Ubuntu type of judgment and decision. And that is something we have to learn and we have to spread, even when we're in like modern societies and we're transferring into court systems and legal systems. We have to be able to operate and implement Ubuntu and know what that means and what people activities are devoid of Ubuntu, and hold the line and make sure people are not violating Ubuntu. And the difference between the Ubuntu in the African sense and when we are living outside of Africa and other countries in their different or Western legal systems. And with that, I yield, and I thank everybody for the setting this forum up and allowing people to participate and get the lessons that are crucial to our development. Free the land and Black Power.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you very much. And thank you for your contribution of the document you dropped in the chat. Queen Rehema, 1 minute, please. And then Ntate Mafole, you close.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I was unable to hear everything. I was in and out. My internet, I was en route actually, so my internet was in and out. But I just wanted to say, first of all, I just love what I did, what I was able to pick up is so wonderful, and we do have to have this again. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for your commitment to learning and sharing what you've learned and the whole purpose of learning it. I wanted to add that when we talk about injecting the education system, I think we really need to be thinking of creative and powerful ways of taking on a whole new education system globally for us. I was in Ghana, I went to the National Archives, and I remember reading about how education, it was mandatory that the children of leaders had to go to school. If they did not go to school, the entire village or the entire area would be taxed. They would be charged. They would have to pay for that. So it was a reason that they were forcing these children who were the lifeline of leadership into these educational institutions to indoctrinate them, I'm sure. So I think that, and I'm here in Gambia right now, and the education system is totally a failure in terms of progressive thinking or anything for the children. It's like set up to do what it does. So when we think about injecting Ubuntu into our education system, I think that we really need to think about what are we doing? Because the children right now are aspiring to pass exams for the British or whoever their colonizers were. And the system is kind of designed around that. And then the other thing I wanted to add is I've done a little bit of research in our educational structures of the past. And I have some information to share when we have our next session, or in between. I can talk with the leadership of this forum regarding Kemet and their educational structure, which was very powerful. And the system, the way they started and moved. And as some sister was saying earlier about our morals and ethics and stuff like that, and the whole wraparound of Ubuntu, this was incorporated in their learning. The children, when they were about their 4th level, they actually have a process that they do to help the children to lead into being, because their aspiration is to reach a higher state. It's not to pass exams for the British or whatever. And the same thing with Dogon and Congo and maybe many other systems that were old that we might want to reach back and study and learn from. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Queen. Before I call Ntate Mafole to give his final closing remarks, King Dumizani, do you want to respond to Queen Teresa before we do that? Queen Teresa raised a complaint.
Yes,
what you
yes.
said, King.
I wrote a message to apologize profusely, to say it was not meant to denigrate. I was just making a point that we must not assume that we are on the same page when it comes to Ubuntu. But the only thing that I've mentioned diaspora as if and generalized about it. So I apologize profusely about that, and I put that in the message. And it not only now directed at Queen Teresa, but just to everybody else, because of all the people who attended, maybe others, this didn't sit well with them. So I apologize. It was not meant in that spirit. It's still in the spirit of Ubuntu and trying to build, but this was directed at ourselves to say, let's go deeper to Ubuntu, research it, so that when we talk about it, it covers the 4 dimensions that Ntate Mafole is talking about. So I apologize profusely.
Thank you, my queen. Thank you, my king. Apology accepted. Thank you. Ntate Mafole, over to you, my king. You're on mute. Should I unmute you? Let's see. Unmute. Are you struggling to unmute? Oh, there you go. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, King Koko. And thank
sorry,
you
again,
to
as
all.
you do that, you want to touch a bit about social justice, or we can, yes, Queen Ida, can we cover that in 2 weeks' time? Are you patient for us to cover social justice in 2 weeks' time?
No problem. It was just, it was being mentioned, so I wanted to sort of hear what it was, but I'm happy for
Thank
2
you.
weeks.
We'll come back to it in full, I think, next time when we come, okay?
Thank you.
Yes. Ntate Mafole.
Okay. Again, thank you, King Koko, and thank you to all of you, your excellencies, for your great inputs, great contributions, great questions that elicit more insights into what we are trying to deliberate here. And indeed, it is very clear that we need more sessions, not another session, King Koko. We need more sessions to deliberate on this. But one of the important things, I'm glad that King Dumisani came up and apologized. One of the challenges about social healing is the need for us to focus on ourselves, because we all need to heal without any exception, me included. I'm on a journey of personal healing, of transpersonal healing. Yeah, we can deliberate on Ubuntu. Yes, it is what we are used to deliberating. But what I want to emphasize here is it is very important for us to do what? To get ourselves out of the impact and the legacy of long-term repression. Teachers themselves will take Ubuntu into the curriculum and change the curriculum and the ways of teaching to support Ubuntu and to develop Ubuntu in the learners. But one of the things that some teachers have identified is the need for teachers. I'm a teacher myself. The need for us as teachers to disentangle ourselves from coloniality, because until and unless we've disentangled ourselves, there's no way that we can be able to deliberate on a meaningful Ubuntu. It will just be cognitive knowledge that we are discussing yet. One of the things about the processes of transformation is that the minute we have gone through the process, then our understanding becomes clearer and becomes more common. We get closer to each other. So even though at an academic level we are used to dialogue and deliberations, we dialogue and deliberate at the level of that limited perspective. So, as I said at the beginning, I will feel successful with this presentation if our level of awareness is raised, if at an individual, a personal level, we feel motivated to want to disentangle ourselves from coloniality so that we can be able to deliberate at a much higher level, that spirituality level, because it is the experience, not the knowledge, that we need. It is that experience. When we have that experience, we come out very different. I cannot explain. King Koko and maybe Queen Teresa would want to close with brief remarks of exactly what it feels like, even within that short space of time that we had together. But thank you very much. I'm looking forward to these added sessions where we will be coming together to talk about the many issues, including the restorative justice, but more than anything, talking about love, because then it will inform all of the other things that we are to be talking about. But thank you very much. I yield.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Ntate. And thank you everyone who was here today, who spent their precious time to listen and contribute to this session. Motho ke motho ka batho. I am because we all are. This is what we say in Ubuntu. It's not just that we say Morena, ke morena ka setjhaba, which means the king is only a king by the virtue of the people he leads, because the king cannot get there, or the leader cannot get there, unless he is supported by the people. And he is there to deliver for the people, not for himself or his family. He is for the people. So we have been working together with Ntate Mafole. There is a program which he has already developed, but I think we'll talk more about that next time. But for now, allow me to thank you a lot and say greetings, good evening, and have a nice one. Until next time, kings and queens.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Powerful session.
Asante sana.
Good night. Thank you so much.
Thank you for a great session. Shalom, shalom.
Thank you.
Thank you, kings and
I'll
queens.
see you
Thank
at the
you.
meeting later tonight if you come in.
That's all right. All right, Ntate. All right, Queen. We'll see each other next time.
Good night.
Bye-bye.